we were waiting for you. We can get started. That's right. Well, thank you so much for being here today. We got almost a full house, and thanks for Senator West in. Got a full house, and we'll have some good discussion today. This is the second meeting of our housing task force that we've put together for the interim. We'll have 6 meetings. I just wanted to say that we're probably not looking for legislation. I mean, if something comes out of this, we're not having this task force to create legislation or develop legislation. We just want to know what's going on across the Commonwealth and with housing issues, and we know that it varies from city to rural areas, and we want to hear the challenges that everybody is facing across the state. So, Madam Clerk, if you want to call our roll.
Senator Rocky Adams. Here. Senator Higdon. Senator West. Here. Senator Yates. Present. Representative Bratcher. Here. Representative Bridges.
Here.
Representative Burke.
Here.
Representative Clines.
Here.
Representative Witten.
Here.
Senator Mills.
And I'm here. And we have a quorum. And first thing on our agenda is our meeting, is the minutes of our June 24th meeting. If I could have a motion to approve the minutes. A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Minutes are approved. All right. Well, we've got a good-looking group of guys here and gals that are going to testify before us today, and we'll just jump right in it. Mayor Craig Greenberg is with us, and you are first, Mayor. Thank you, and welcome to our committee.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all so much for inviting me again to join you all here. I was just honored to testify last month at the Interim Joint Committee on Local Government. I'm honored again to be here with my colleague Elizabeth Strojan, who's the new Executive Director of the Louisville Metro Housing Authority that I'll talk about in a moment. It's great to be with some friends from Jefferson County and friends from around the state. So thank you all so much for having us. In June, when we talked to the Interim Joint Local Government Committee, we talked about how Louisville is one of the engines of Kentucky's economy, and more than a third of the state's gross domestic product is generated within the Louisville region. And we are focused in Louisville on continuing to grow our economy and to grow our population. And that is one of our biggest challenges. And to do that, we need more housing. We need more housing of all types across the board. But right now, we have a critical shortage of housing in Jefferson County. To give you a scale of the amount of housing that we need, just before this started, I had a chance to chat with Mayor Gregory from Elizabethtown, who I assume, Mayor, you're probably testifying shortly after here. And we need as many new units of housing as currently exist in all of Mayor Gregory's town of Elizabethtown. That's how many units of housing we need throughout our city. And keep in mind that over the last 5 years in Jefferson County, we have built more than 18,000 units of affordable housing. Yet during those same 5 years, our gap of needed units of affordable housing has grown from 31,000 units now to 36,000 units. So while we continue to build more, our gap in our need for affordable housing grows even more. So over the last 5 years, we've lost ground. And we're running out of ground quite literally in Jefferson County. I know that everyone on your task force, on your committee, everyone in the audience, we all want more single-family homes. I want more single-family homes for the residents of Louisville. And the good news is we're building more single-family homes across our city. And we will continue to build more. We're saving single-family homes. We're renovating and restoring single-family homes. And we will continue to do all of that. But here's our problem. To build 15,000 single-family homes, which is my goal for my first term as mayor, to build 15,000 single-family homes to achieve that goal would take approximately 3,100 acres of land. And Chairman Mills, I'm guessing that in Henderson County, there might be 3,100 acres of land to build 15,000 single-family homes on. Our challenge in Jefferson County, as Co-Chair Witten can tell you, is we don't have 3,100 acres of land to build those houses on. So we need to find other solutions in addition to just single-family homes to address our housing shortage. Again, this is a housing shortage across all economic spectrums in every part of our city. So how do we make this happen? How do we build the number of housing units that we need, knowing they cannot all be single-family homes? To do that, we believe that we need to build with some more density. If we don't add density to our city, to our county, we will not be able to grow as a city. We will not be able to grow the economy that will continue to fuel great things in Louisville and across the entire Commonwealth. So we're focused on several things. One, we're focused on converting our vacant downtown office buildings. And I want to thank each of you, everyone in the General Assembly, that part of the appropriations you passed last year, you included $100 million for downtown Louisville. And some of that $100 million will be used to convert vacant downtown buildings into housing. That's wonderful. That's needed. I'm so excited about what that means for housing, what that means for downtown Louisville, what that means for the economy of the Commonwealth. But that alone won't be nearly enough. We also, as I said, we need more smaller lot single-family homes. We need more townhouses. We need more duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, and more. Building a range of housing options is a solution to build with some more density. It also addresses the challenges in building any types of housing right now. It's very challenging with the financing markets the way they are to finance all types of housing. Right now, it seems the easiest to finance types of housings are either luxury single-family homes or very large apartment buildings. Those are the two areas of housing that seem to be those that can get most and easily financed. But we need more than just that. Again, we want more townhomes that can be affordable to maybe first-time home buyers or renters. That's a great way to start. The Kentucky Chamber of Commerce has said that we need to build as many as 529,000 new homes across our entire state by 2050. The only way to do that, with Jefferson County and Louisville helping contribute, is to build all types of housing. And so that's what we are here to talk about and encourage as you all start to think of some legislation, what can help us in Jefferson County and across the state with all types. If we don't respond, our economy in Louisville can't grow. Our economy across the state will not grow. And rising home costs, which will be another side effect of not building enough housing, the rising housing costs will impact all Kentuckians, particularly those who can least afford it. We're already experiencing that in Louisville. Again, some numbers. Over the past 8 years in Louisville, rent has risen by 37%, and median home prices have jumped 48%. Almost 50% of our renters in Jefferson County spend more than 30% of their income just on housing. And 25% of our renters spend more than 50% of their income on housing. And I know that renters in other parts of Kentucky certainly face the same challenges. That makes it very, very difficult. And this imbalance makes finding housing particularly difficult for our most vulnerable Kentuckians, like seniors who are living on fixed incomes. And this is why supporting the production of housing, where the private market may not currently operate well or efficiently, will create a ripple effect that will help housing affordability and more choices for low-income households and middle-income households, for all households. So we must work together to think of creative incentive structures to build workforce housing, to build housing for people, for middle-income housing people, and to free up more supply for those at our lowest income earners. I think all of us here today, believe strongly that safe, quality, affordable housing is fundamental to everything else we do in life. It's fundamental to successful and productive lives for all of our families across Louisville. And in Louisville, no one is working harder to help folks who are most in need having access to safe, quality, and affordable housing than my colleague Elizabeth Strojan, who's here with me today. Elizabeth is our relatively new executive director of the Louisville Metro Housing Authority. She's from Louisville. She grew up at Jefferson County Public Schools. She spent some time in New York as the chief of staff at New York City's largest housing finance development authority. And we were fortunate enough that she decided to come back home recently to lead LMHA into the future. LMHA currently serves 30,000 people, almost all of whom are our lowest income community members. And public housing and rental assistance vouchers provide a safety net for our most vulnerable residents and a stepping stone for a better life, a better future. 90% of Louisville Metro Housing Authority's budget comes from the federal government. And Elizabeth and all of Louisville Metro government, we are working as hard as possible to leverage those federal funds to do even more with our housing authority. You all may have seen in the news recently that one of our biggest developments, Dosker Manor, and other legacy projects in Louisville like Dosker Manor are in desperate need of repairs or redevelopment. And so LMHA is working very closely with our city government, with HUD and out of DC, with the Kentucky Housing Corporation, and other outside private partners to put plans in place to address all of these issues so the most vulnerable Louisvillians have quality, safe, and affordable housing. But in addition to those properties that so many people are familiar with, LMHA also operates properties all across our city. Properties that I didn't even know were LMHA properties, and I've driven by them a million times until Elizabeth pointed them out. And the truth is that Louisville needs our housing authority to be successful, just as cities and towns all across the Commonwealth need their housing authorities to be successful so that we can safely, affordably, and in a good way house some of lowest income Kentuckians. And LMHA needs some help. They need more access to credits and bonds, ideally set-asides, so that they can do some of the transformative work that we need to do in Jefferson County to improve the quality of our housing for the lowest income earners and ensure that they're stably housed and get supportive services that they need. And that's one solution. You have a handout that we have provided to you with some other suggested proposals as well, some of which the state can help on, some of which we'd like to work collaboratively with you to go to our representatives and senators in Washington, D.C., and ask the federal government to help not just Louisville, but every city and town and county across the state as well, because we all need help to address this challenging issue to provide safe, quality, and affordable housing for our lowest income earners. We have provided some of these suggestions on the handout. And just briefly to go over a few before both Elizabeth and I are happy to take any questions that you all have. And we hope that just as the beginning of our conversation, of partnership, of Louisville and other cities working collaboratively with the state government to do more, to build more housing of all types of housing across the entire state. One suggestion that could be helpful is that we expand the support for housing with some of the existing state economic development tools that we have. We could do that by expanding the use of industrial revenue bonds for affordable housing, by modifying the definition of building to include affordable housing projects. That would give KEDFA some authority to help us on some of these issues. Kentucky could follow some other states that have created statewide affordable housing tax credits, states like Ohio and Florida, both of which have good starting points to look at low-income housing tax credits that can support rental units as well as affordable home ownership units. We're proposing that you all consider revolving loan funds to help build affordable and workforce housing that is so desperately needed by those who are working to do it, whether it's for-profit developers or whether it's some of our great nonprofit providers as well. Folks, some of which who are here today with us. States that have done this include Oklahoma and Montana. We also have some challenges with the way that our local government operates in the development process. The Kentucky Chamber's recent report also cites that two of our biggest barriers to housing production across the state are overly restrictive land use and zoning rules and expensive government relations. Every time that a state or a city adds barriers that makes it more difficult to build housing, that means it's more expensive to build housing. And so we'd welcome some conversations about ways to improve that for builders of housing across the entire state. And finally, some thoughts on our land bank. Our land bank is a process where we take vacant and abandoned properties and help recycle them so they can get into new, useful hands that can create new home ownership opportunities for families or rental opportunities. And there are some ways that some other states have taken action to make that process easier so that vacant and abandoned properties that are bringing down neighborhoods that can be converted into new housing opportunities for families. States like Tennessee have done that. They've seemed to be working well, and we welcome conversations about that as well so we can improve the quality of our housing, get more families into safe, quality, and affordable housing, and also improve public safety in some of our most challenging neighborhoods. So those are just some of the areas. There's a lot of things that can be done in Louisville and other parts of the state. We appreciate your focus on this issue. We hope to be your partners in addressing this challenging issue so people in Louisville and people all across the Commonwealth of Kentucky have safe, quality, and affordable housing, regardless of their income level, regardless of the circumstances of life they were born into, regardless of where they live. Thank you all very much, and we're happy to answer any questions.
Very good, Mayor. Thank you so much. We got a couple questions. Before we get into these questions, just a comment about NCSL next week. What's that going to do for Louisville?
We are incredibly excited to host NCSL in Louisville next week, where we're going to be very ready to host not just the country, but as President Stivers recently told me, hosting the world as well. My understanding is that there are over 5,000 folks that have registered for NCSL, that NCSL is breaking records with registration. People from all 50 states. I can't remember how many countries right now President Stivers told me he'll be there from, but it's going to be an international conference. And Louisville, one of the things that we do best is welcoming people from around the world with our great hospitality. Whether it's the Kentucky Derby every year, whether it's the PGA Championship, whether it's the upcoming Bourbon and Beyond and Louder Than Life festivals, or whether it's the Sundance Film Festival that right now we're one of 6 cities that's a finalist as Sundance Film Festivals considers moving. We love to host the world in Louisville, and we're thrilled to be hosting NCSL next week. So I will see all of you who are there, I'm sure often, in Louisville next week.
All right, thank you. Senator Rocky Adams has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mayor, for being here. You have shown an incredible desire to be a partner, particularly with all those Republicans and Democrats in the delegation here. So thank you for that. One of the things that you didn't mention that I want to make sure that is on your radar is when we talk about housing and affordable housing and ownership and affordable home ownership, is that there is a transportation component to it. And so infrastructure is just as important as having the people building the homes and those that are ready to move in. And so I just want to make sure that we build and we think about projects in terms of appropriateness based upon our current infrastructure challenges. So thank you. I appreciate all you're doing.
Thanks, Senator Rocky Adams. I could not agree more with you. And I mean, let's just be candid. We have to deal with the reality if we're going to address challenges like housing and challenges like Senator Rocky Adams just pointed out of transportation, particularly public transportation. And in Louisville, we have challenges in that area as well. Right now, we have a wonderful new executive director of TARC, the transit authority at River City, that is our public transportation our agency in Louisville. And he and the board and his team at TARC are working on a new transportation route for what the future of TARC looks like. Because what we're doing right now is not working. Ridership is down significantly from before pre-COVID highs. The previous leadership of TARC, they were spending one-time federal American Rescue Plan funds sort of on an operating basis. And so in the short term, we have had to cut the routes that TARC offers. But they are going to be soon releasing some new ideas for what the future routes for TARC should look like. We're going to be doing a lot of community engagement to get feedback on that. And then you might be hearing from me again as well on that, but I thought it was premature to talk to the state about any type of partnership on public transportation until we had a plan. And so that's what TARC is working on right now, and I could not agree more that we need to improve our public transportation system. That goes hand in hand with housing.
Senator West.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mayor, for the great presentation. My question pertains to density, as you spoke of. And so I think most of this occurred during the Johnson administration, LBJ, the war on poverty, where the federal government would go into a city and erect these high-rise structures for affordable housing, and all with good intentions. Many times they would destroy some architectural gems and put up this ugly structure, not an inviting structure. And so that's, after 40 or 50 years, I think a lot of that's been torn down. And looking back, hindsight's always 20/20, right? So looking back, I think we see clearly that was probably a failure of the government in an attempt to provide more housing. So they became crime-ridden and just really eyesores to the community. In this move to become more dense, are you taking that into account and maybe trying to not make the same mistakes that we made in the past? And I guess the ultimate question is, by doing that, make this more of a bridge to home ownership and give the person living there skin in the game, like something to shoot for. Have you thought about that?
Yeah, and I think this is going to be an area that Elizabeth might have a lot to weigh in on as well. So three things come to mind immediately, and then I'll turn over to Elizabeth. One, when I talk, first of all, you are correct. So take, for example, and in Louisville, we've had some of those same experiences, and Elizabeth can talk to that more. And so Dosker Manor, for example, the three tall brick high-rises that you see if you're coming into the city from either 64 West or 71 South, those are the three tall brick buildings that you see right by the medical center in downtown Louisville. Right now, at its peak, approximately 600 people lived in those three buildings in conditions very similar to what you just described. We are working on a plan right now where the residents are moving out. Those will ultimately be demolished and a new development will be rebuilt. The new development will not have 600 residents. It will be a less dense development than that. So when I say density, I'm not talking about all high rises along the lines that you're talking about. What I'm talking about really is two types of density. One is around our highest traffic corridors. So in Louisville, for those of you from Jefferson County, think everything from Shelbyville Road to Dixie Highway, Poplar Level Road, Preston Highway, the main arterials throughout our county, to permit more density for housing on those high traffic areas, in large part to Senator Rocky Adams' point, because that's going to be where the best public transportation and the best infrastructure is available, whether it's affordable housing or any type of housing. So I'm talking about density along there. And then the other type of density that we're talking about is when you think of the way the world is evolving, people are looking to live in different ways than they have historically. So maybe in residential neighborhoods where right now it's just single family homes, some of those single family homes maybe become duplexes and they take a 3/4 of an acre lot and it's still two single family units that are owned, but maybe it's a duplex and maybe they each have only 1/3 of an acre instead of 3/4 of an acre. And so really from an architectural standpoint, there is no visible added density, but maybe two families just live on smaller lots than what historically has been the case. If you do that, those are the types of density thoughts that we're talking about when it comes to home ownership in particular. But I think Elizabeth can share some experiences from New York City and Louisville as well on that issue.
Absolutely. I appreciate that question. And I moved in New York City. I lived in a high-rise built in the 1960s, and I'm now the landlord of several high-rises built in the 1960s. And I think you have to look at the context of the community. So when the mayor's talking about density, like he said, he's not talking about 17-story buildings full of people that need more services than we can provide. But you know, I live in the Highlands in Louisville now, so you might walk past a single family home and the home next door is a duplex and the home next door is an apartment building, and it makes for a beautifully diverse neighborhood. So density can look different depending on what the context is. I'm sure that those senior high rises made sense in the 1960s, but now we're dealing with a situation where the best option is to get people out of there, to tear some of them down and to rebuild something less dense. It's still going to look more dense than many of you would see in your communities, but for downtown Louisville, it'll make a lot of sense. So we're hopeful that the Department of Housing and Urban Development agrees with that plan. And on homeownership, I just wanted to make a quick comment, if that's okay. One of the things we do at LMHA, we run the largest Section 8 program in the state. So that typically provides tenants with rental assistance so they can go rent a unit in the private market. They pay a third of their income towards rent, and that voucher pays the rest. But we are able to do some incredibly innovative things at LMHA with our Section 8 vouchers, one of which is that we have a homeownership program in Section 8. So this summer, knock on wood, we'll hit 500, which means that we've helped 500 people, 500 families in Louisville go from low-income rentals to owning a home. And then we don't just stop there. After they own their home, we put on maintenance clinics to help them understand how to fix a toilet, how to change a light bulb, because it's a big jump for some people. But we totally agree that home ownership is part of the equation.
I should also add that we, at the city of Louisville, with some of the city's American Rescue Plan funding, created a new program called Revert, where we are offering $50,000 down payment grants to eligible families to buy homes in previously redlined neighborhoods. So some of the neighborhoods that were most impacted over the past couple of generations by some of the practices of redlining now are being provided with grants to buy their own homes. That's a home ownership program.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Bratcher.
Well, everybody hit my issues pretty good. I do appreciate working with you, Mayor. You've reached out to all of us in Jefferson County, no matter what, if it's a D or an R behind the name. You've been working great with us, and we really appreciate that. It's something kind of new with us. You know, I've kind of been a state representative that's try to be close to the people as I can. If you have a constituent complaint, I'll be out there the next day looking with it, with MSD or with LG&E or whatever. And I can tell you that after like a quarter of a decade of doing this, traffic used to be, you know, when you list the problems you'd like your government to work on, traffic would be one of those things. Well, I complain about it on Friday afternoon and I forgot about it on Monday. But it ain't like that anymore. It's sticking around. Fern Creek is going through some very traffic congested issues right now. And it's something that we have to look at during these future conversations I hope we all keep having. And I hope to be a part of it. Density is going to add to the traffic. And I know, you know, my brother lived in Atlanta for many years, and I'd go down there. And I know if you're going to have a big, successful city with headquarters, corporate headquarters is what you want, and we want to attract that, you're going to have traffic. But it's got to, you know, it seems like we could evolve into something where we could find ways to fix this, and I don't know what that would be, but that's what I'm going to be looking at going farther in these conversations is density. And then quickly, when you say affordable housing, and I don't know if there's an official definition of that or if we all have our own, could you quickly just define, in your opinion, what affordable housing is?
That's a great question. I'm unaware of, I think different people mean different things. What I mean when I say affordable housing is that no family should have to spend more than 30% of their income on housing. So whether it's rent, whether it's a mortgage payment, utilities included in there, that no family should have to spend more than 30% of their income on their housing. So that's a different number for every family depending on their circumstances, but that leaves them with enough, hopefully enough other income to then do all the other things in life that families need to spend money on. We are aware of the challenges that you're talking about with respect to traffic, particularly in the Fern Creek area there, and particularly south of Gene Snyder on Bardstown Road in Fern Creek, as you're talking about. Representative Bratcher, we look forward to partnering with you on that. And one of the things
I'm glad you've heard of that.
one of the things that
I'm impressed.
One of the things that Elizabeth was talking about that we think we should be looking at, again, maybe density is the wrong word because we don't mean to imply high rises everywhere, but if you have more neighborhoods where you can walk to restaurants, to grocery stores, to other services, that those are great neighborhoods for the future, and we can reduce the reliance on needing our car for absolute everything we do in life. That's part of what we're looking to do is to create mixed-use neighborhoods as well, where there are single-family homes, some apartments, some duplexes, all in the same community.
Representative Bridges.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good to see you, Mayor, and Elizabeth. Is it Strojan?
That's right.
Okay. We're glad to have you here. Mayor, as you know, we've had several conversations, some pretty lengthy ones. A couple of comments. I wasn't going to talk about density, but I just got back from a conference on housing that touched on that. The commercial districts that are closed down, abandoned, and everything, when it comes to infrastructure, are perfect for some of this because they're used to dealing with hardscapes, runoff, stormwater, that nature. Residential, on the other hand, when they set the zoning up and everything for lot sizes and everything, they were set up for 30, 50 years because home mortgage is 30 years. Time you get it built out, it's 10 or 15. So, sometimes if we start adding additional structures to existing subdivisions and stuff, we start adding the extra parking spaces, that hardscape. I know there's I have heard some instances where they're running into the infrastructure wasn't able to take care of that. So just throwing that out, that's freebie. We're not going to charge you for that today, but just keep that in mind when you do that to make sure that when you start growing, the commercial's perfect because they're already set up for it, but the residential's a little different. But my question is on, you mentioned the voucher system, Section 8, all that. What are your requirements for people to qualify for that?
So Section 8 voucher is a federal program. So you can't be over a certain income threshold. Okay. Typically it's 80% AMI for the Section 8 program. But the reality is that we and everybody that administers Section 8 programs, we're serving lower and lower income people. So the NYU Furman Center, which is a think tank that studies these kinds of issues, has recently released data showing that all over the country, people who rely on public housing and Section 8, their incomes are going down. So when we talk about the need for housing across the board, if folks with Section 8 vouchers don't have anywhere else to go, I mean, that's literally the most vulnerable Kentuckians. Like, we're serving a lot of folks on fixed incomes. The average income in some of our developments in public housing is like $9,000 a year. Okay. So that we're dealing with people who have very few options.
Follow. And I do understand that. I guess I should have been more specific. What about a time frame? And the reason I say that, we talking to different ones around the nation, different states and everything. Some have zero. You just come in the community, you apply for it, and when you get in line, you get to enter into it. Others have requirements that, you have to be a resident for 6 months or a year. And what I'm getting from them, and this is just for benefit, is that, it seems like it would be good wisdom to have a time frame that you're not opening up a market for surrounding cities, surrounding counties, surrounding states. Say, hey, they don't have a time limit. Just go over there and they're going to take care. And you don't want to be a funnel. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you're talking about some kind of residency requirement prior to applying, prior to getting that kind of assistance.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. I'm not aware of what the different federal regulations are on that or what other cities are doing. I'd be happy to look at it. Right now, our waiting lists are closed. It's almost like a moot point because the demand in the city of Louisville for the resources that we provide is so much higher than what we're able to do. But I hear what you're saying.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, our last question is from Senator Yates.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Mayor, thank you for being here. Mr. Stoker's good to see you. I guess I came on the Metro Council in 2010, and it seems like we've had the same kind of ongoing issues. Only thing is they've gotten worse. As some things in our city have really improved, the need We did the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and when I was president, we fully funded the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. We saw what that worked. It really, really gave back and made a difference. And so I know we were kind of pushing to make sure the state does the same thing. And that's one of the beautiful things of taking little pieces in cities and seeing what works. We know it works. So it makes economic sense. The tough thing, and we've talked a little bit about here, is that balance. At the local level, you're always looking to make sure that landlords are making sure they're treating tenants fairly and making sure they provide the necessities. But you also want to make sure you have a market where landlords are wanting to invest in and develop rental property. And it's that constant battle. And so what I have learned is probably best, especially as I sit here at the state level, is to give the local areas the discretion. I think that's so important in these areas, because within E-Town needs to have that certain levels of discretion to deal with and same thing in Louisville and the different areas. So, and that way we can look at best practices as it relates to that area. And I think that trying to do the infill downtown and taking some of those office spaces and turn those into residential actually helps with those density issues and traffic, because when people can live where they work and play, we deal with those issues. So that makes sense, but it takes a significant amount of money to turn that in. But everywhere we went, remember we traveled, we went to Austin, we went to all these different places, in the states that invested in the cities, it paid back dividends. And so I'm excited to have us here as we look at solutions. It's problematic that we're 10 years behind onto it, but the beautiful thing about 10 years behind is we get to learn from our else's mistakes and implement that. So I appreciate your being here as a partner with us, both of you.
Thank you, Senator.
Okay. One last question. Senator Higdon was not here today, but he phoned in a question about what is the average cost you use when planning for affordable housing? The cost per unit. Do y'all have a number on that?
I think that varies widely.
Yeah, I think though that's a tough answer, because a little bit back to Senator Yates' point, if you're renovating an existing building in downtown Louisville, for example, renovating a historic older building can be significantly more expensive than building on on what was previously just grass in a suburban part of Jefferson County. And then the cost of land also impacts it so much, or how much infrastructure is needed to be built to service it. Is it a 200-unit apartment or 100? I just don't know that. I'm not being in that business. I don't have that information, but Elizabeth and I can certainly follow up on that question and provide you all with some information on that. And we will.
I mean, ultimately, those numbers are justified by HUD probably at some point, right?
Yeah,
there's all kinds of costs.
And one thing I want to say is, when we talk about affordable housing that has been the recipient of a low-income housing tax credit or some other type of subsidy, the quality of the housing is no different. All that's happening is the federal or state support is helping to reduce the monthly cost for the tenant, so that someone who earns less can have the same quality of housing. Just one anecdote I'll finish on. We've got, as I mentioned, there are some great nonprofit partners that are working in these areas across the community. Lori Flannery from New Directions, I know, is here today. HPI, Rebound, other organizations doing great work across the community. I was going to meet one of these individuals leading one of these organizations actually before I was mayor. And they told me where to meet them, and I was driving out Shelbyville Road. It was in the Middletown area of Jefferson County. And I actually went to the wrong location, because there were two similarly looking apartment developments right across the street from each other. And so I went to one, and the other, that was not the affordable housing. I couldn't tell the difference from the outside or the inside of the quality of units of what was affordable and what was not. Same quality. One just had some support so that teachers and firefighters and police officers and people who work at the Ford factory and who work for UPS and Amazon that are not our highest income earners could afford to live in the same unit. To me, that's the benefit we can provide, whether we're the state or the city, to help affordable housing.
Well, very good, Mayor. I think you've given some very good testimony today for us to put in our record from we will ultimately put together a report at the end of this task force where everybody can see our notes and compare notes. So thank you so much for your time and your testimony.
Thank you all very much.
Yes. All right. Next is our CAECO group. If judges, if y'all want to come up. I think Ms. Hampton's with you as well. So, We'll shift gears from big city to big counties and small county or medium-sized county.
Let's see.
We got somebody from Western Kentucky too. Yeah.
We do. I'm just trying to get this to start the slide. Sorry. Great. Hi, Mark. I don't know why I'm blanking on the button. So close. Thank you. Thank you, co-chairs Witten and co-chair Mills, for this opportunity to be here with you all today. I'm Shelley Hampton. I'm Director of Government Affairs for the Kentucky Association of Counties. With me today is Judge Gary Moore from Boone County to my immediate right, and Marshall County Commissioner Monty Collins in the west. We also, if you notice on your PowerPoint, we also were expecting Johnson County Judge Mark McKenzie. Unfortunately, he had a family issue arise and needed to take care of that, and obviously that is way more important. So he sends his regrets. He did send me some of the comments he would like for me to share, but we'll keep the PowerPoint in this order if that works for you, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
But again, thank you for this, and I'll turn the chair or the microphone over to Judge Moore.
Well, thank you, Shelley. It is a pleasure to be with you today, and again, thanks to our co-chairs and all the committee members for taking the time out of a busy summer day to be hearing this issue. This issue is an enormous issue for our communities across the Commonwealth. I and the other two judge executives in Kenton and Campbell, the Northern Kentucky judge executives, were hearing regularly about housing. And we got together with our 5 southern counties, the 8 counties that make up the Northern Kentucky Area Development District, and we wanted to know, what is the issue? So we decided, let's take an inventory of what we have now and do some evaluation of what we're doing well, maybe what we could do better. We did an RFQ timeline. That all started back in 2022. We did the RFP for a housing study in 2022. We awarded a bid to Stantec Engineering. I knew Stantec as a road builder. Those in transportation, I'm sure Senator Higdon, Chair Higdon, knows of Stantec. I didn't even know they had a housing division, but nationally they do. It's based they have an office in Boston as well as San Francisco, but others across the country. Our consultant was based in Boston, but they do these evaluations. They won our work, and they continued to focus on that throughout the study. Following the timeline, in the 2023, they released the inventory, and in 2024, we then engaged with the Northern Kentucky AD, the 8 counties, to begin to launch a housing working group to analyze the data and to begin to assess what we might want to do. I want to make clear that the Stantec study did not come with recommendations. We wanted an inventory, we wanted to know where we were, and now we're moving toward recommendations and solutions. We are the housing work group based at the AD. Will be releasing recommendations, we hope, by November of 2024. So that's our timeline. What we found right away, do a great job of building 3 and 4 bedroom single family houses. Great job of that. And it's market driven. That's what the builders and the developers sell. That's where the funding is. That's where people can afford. And that's a strength. What we're not building is 1 bedroom and 2 bedroom units, whether owner occupied or rental. Often when we talk about 1 and 2 bedroom units, people immediately think, oh, you're talking about apartments and rental. That's not exactly all that's not all in all cases. We know that in order to build affordable units that are owner occupied, we've got to lower the cost of those units, and you can't build 3 and 4 bedroom McMansions and do that. So more attached housing, owner occupied, 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, those kinds of solutions is what the task force is studying. The one thing that we also found is one county is not going to solve this. This has to be a regional approach, because when we're talking about income-aligned housing, many times these jobs are at the lower end of the scale, and an individual is only going to commute a certain amount of time. Maybe 20 minutes max is what we're being told by some of our employers. If someone's making a lower wage, on how far they can afford to travel or willing to travel. And many times it's transit-based. So what are those routes? What do they look like? And how long is someone going to ride a tank bus in order to get to an $18 an hour job? So Senator Adams mentioned transit earlier. That's very much a component of what we're looking at, what we're studying. We also know what's acceptable to a community varies from county to county, and even within a county. Within Boone County, there's places that people definitely understand the need for low-income housing and may be willing to consider it. Other parts of the county, they know we need it, but not in my backyard. So we know that within counties, local control is going to be huge. We know that planning and zoning will do its job. By the way, we often hear about planning and zoning being an obstacle, and when I was running some numbers and look at this, I was amazed to find that the Stantec study says we need to build 6,650 units across the region as quickly as possible. I have 6,500 units approved through planning and zoning today. They're approved. They're not built yet. 4,300 of those are single family, 3,200 are multifamily. So zoning is not the obstacle in my case. And I think these numbers will justify that. We do know that the affordability is much different. I'm going to wrap up here because I know we have other testimony. I want to allow time for your questions. But income aligned is the key word here. We're not talking just about HUD, low income vouchers. We're talking about the police officer, the nurse, the school teacher, entry level. What can they afford? College graduates that are making 50, 60,000. We have some data that says that a person earning between 70,000 and 106,000, whether that's an individual wage or household, they can afford $1,600 to $2,500 a month. There's not housing being built that you can own or occupy for that. You may be lucky and find an apartment for that. So fixing this problem is going to take some creative solutions. I'm going to pause there and wait for your questions and turn it over to my colleagues. But we're excited to have this opportunity, and we'll talk about solutions here in a minute.
Let's move through the process, the presentation, then we'll ask our questions.
I
know Senator Yates has a question, but we'll hold on a second.
Okay. I'll just, if it's okay, I'll just read what Judge McKenzie sent me that he would like to have shared with you all. He's very passionate about this issue. In 2019, when he took office, he wanted to promote Johnson County as having great school systems, giga-capable internet straight to the home already in place, strong water and sewer utilities, and available affordable housing. However, the shift in the last 3 years in the housing market, as seen with reduced inventory, rental units filling up, and new construction slowing, has interest rates and material costs altogether out of our control. We wanted to be proactive with our developers in our community, property owners, and community partners by providing information about possible new opportunities and our plans for utility growth. Our decision was to host a local housing summit. Also, our summit took place 2 days after the release of the Kentucky Housing Corp's gap analysis study that you all heard about last month that confirmed the housing needs that we knew that Johnson County already had. There were over 15 partners from industry and related services, speakers presenting on information on all levels of housing. For example, housing for the unsheltered, transitional, multifamily, and single family, with an emphasis on how this is vitally important to our economic development. Lastly, we emphasized our plans for expanded public sewer service throughout our county. This let potential builders, property owners, and developers know where they may want to focus any planned housing development efforts. After the summit and learning more about housing needs, continued support from the legislature for funds to expand utilities is critical, and consideration of developer tax incentives could help spur development while hopefully interest rates and material costs moderate soon. So he just wanted to share that with you all. So thank you all for letting me do that for him. Next, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Collins.
Thank you. And I want to thank you all for bringing more attention to this very important subject across the Commonwealth. I'm not only a county commissioner, but a proud Kentucky Realtor as well. So I live and breathe this every day. And if there has ever been an industry over the last 4 or 5 years that has proven out the law of supply and demand, it has been real estate. We are now, I believe, this month at 2.81 months of supply, when economists will tell you 5 to 7 months is a balanced market. So we're substantially lower than that. It's better than it has been, but what that has caused, obviously, is a 40% increase across the Commonwealth in prices since 2019. So it's not just your urban areas. It's an issue everywhere with supply. And what I wanted to speak on as it relates to that, someone from a rural county in West Kentucky, is obviously we as realtors cannot increase supply on our own. It takes those who are willing to go out and develop land and build homes on it. And specifically in Marshall County, the areas where you would be able to do that, which would be outside the cities, that would allow that much development. Unfortunately, we don't have the infrastructure there already. So while I want to absolutely thank you for the investment that you have already made in infrastructure across our Commonwealth, I would tell you again from a rural elected officials standpoint. I know Shelley had asked me earlier. We were talking about broadband. I have lost very few deals because of maybe someone on a well versus having water, but I have lost a lot because of internet access. And Shelley said, are you telling me that these companies aren't knocking down your door now because of the investment? And I would tell you, not in rural Kentucky, unfortunately. We have a few projects that are going, but not enough. And I will tell you, we're a county of around 33,000. The figure that they gave us that it would cost to get to unserved and underserved is $26 million. We have about a $20 million budget. So anything that you can do to help us help these developers, we would certainly appreciate. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's get to our questions here. Senator Yates. Sorry.
Well, first of all, thank you, Mr. Chair, and I think you went through and you started covering it. I would just, my other hat, I'm a trial lawyer, but also have always had real estate and mostly commercial, but some residential into it. And we talked about, you look at the zoning applications and having about 6,000 zoning applications in there. And I know to us, a lot of times it's easier, and I guess the profits there, if your cap rate is an 8% cap rate, that's a whole lot easier to swallow if you're building $1 million house as opposed to lower income. And so a lot of times the issues, if we don't address zoning, is the investment in areas will be just one area as opposed to all the others to address the need. And so having served on about a decade at the local level, sometimes I have to look and say, all right, well, how many applications do I have? But are they what I want to represent the future of my area? And how do I kind of change that? And so I have always believed that providing that local discretion back to each individual area is the best way for the state to do it, and hopefully you guys would agree. Yeah.
If I may, a couple of bits of data that I think lend to that. The average tenure of someone living in their home, on average, was 7 to 10 years. In Boone County, it was really about 6 years. Now, post-COVID, 14 years. So why are people that are now empty nesters that are ready to downsize, and go to something smaller, and then you have the growing families who want their 3 and 4 bedroom house that they want to sell? Why isn't it happening?
Interest
rates. And in some case, the housing cost. So for an individual that's an empty nester to downsize, they're going to spend substantially more money for a smaller unit. And in some cases, they still do it just because of lifestyle and efficiencies. But that is really clogging up the housing inventory that we talked about. Another end of the spectrum, in Boone County, we manage 1,003 HUD vouchers. I have a consolidated assisted housing department with my cities, and it's a county department. 1,003 vouchers. Before COVID, there'd be a 6-month waiting period to get one of those vouchers. People that qualified wanted them, they'd wait for them. Today, I have 861 vouchers being used. The rest are sitting there, not being used, because the owners of multifamily housing that used to accept HUD vouchers, when the housing inventory got tight, they found out they could raise their rent, leave the HUD program, not have to go through the HUD inspections and all the hoops, and market rate. Those units that they might have been getting $1,000, $1,200 a month for with HUD vouchers, they're now renting them for $1,500, $1,600, maybe $1,800 a month, and it's easier. So we need to build housing that would accept. So the mayor and his assistant, they were talking about building some HUD-based voucher housing. Something we're looking at, and I know the other counties in northern Kentucky are looking, because we have vouchers that aren't being used because of market rate challenges.
Judge Morris, good to see you again. I know for years our paths have intertwined. I find what you're saying really interesting, and a lot of the things that we're hearing today is like the free market's not working, and then you come up, and then that last one is, well, it is working because we're having landlords that are making more money and not even participate in the program. I guess overall, and then when you said zoning is not the problem, and this begs the question, what is? And I guess that's why this task force was created. But I just hope that we all realize that, just like Judge Moore said, we're in cycles. This stuff cycles, and we don't want to come out with recommendations or in your. I'll come back to that in a second. And come out with recommendations in these groups, and like not taking into consideration, if you stand around and wait 2 or 3 years, things have completely changed. And I would hope that we will recognize that. And then the last question, what is the group that you're working on again?
This is a Northern Kentucky Area Development District, our AD district. We are working on a housing task force study. We have the inventory from the Stantec report, and now we're developing strategies. This task force is made up of individuals from our Northern Kentucky Realtors Association, the building industry of Northern Kentucky, home builders, commercial, industrial, and residential. We have cities and counties at the table, and other individual social service agencies that run assisted housing and other social programs where they're interacting with the community where there are needs. So all of these individuals and others come together. The developers, the builders, are coming together to develop some strategies. I met with my director of housing building inspections on Friday, And we were talking about new tools that we're developing for online applications and websites to where we can streamline it, make it easier for people to apply for building permits, to build for expansion to their existing units, whatever it might be. So streamlining the process with planning and zoning, with building inspection, and other tools. So this group's coming together from a lot of different angles to really come up with some recommendations to elected officials. I keep talking about local control, but this task force will tell us, county judges, county commissioners, county magistrates, city governments, they're going to help us sort through this and tell us what their views are. Of course, we're elected by our population, same people that elect you, and we also have to gauge what our public is willing to absorb. But at least we're going to have the recommendations and we're going to have the data from this task force. So I'm really excited about their work.
Okay, thank you.
All right, final question, Representative Clines.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Judge Moore, for being here and representing as a representative from 2 counties over, representing Northern Kentucky, and I want to thank all 3 of you for being here and CAECO in general. You know, you talked about downsizing. Are there any discussions in CAECO about specific senior living communities and those being built to help maybe move or transition residents?
Not specifically just that. The housing issue itself has, I think, for a long time not been a top burner issue for us. We've just now in the last year or 2 started to hear about this from our members of a very grassroots organization, but we haven't talked about that specifically. I don't know if Marshall or Ben specifically has, but
you know, the counties, as we've said before, are so different. Most counties, your populations in your county seat or whatever, in Boone and Kenton and Campbell, we have a lot of unincorporated areas that have substantial population. In Boone County, by the way, we're either the 4th or 5th largest county, depending on us and Warren, which month you look at us. And out of my 142,000 population, 93,000 people do not live in a city. 93,000. So that unincorporated Boone would be 20,000 bigger than Bowling Green, which is technically the 3rd largest city. If you're looking at city data, they're 70-some thousand. We're 93,000 unincorporated. So county issues vary greatly from one county to the next, depending on where your population is. I've got a lot of subdivisions. I've got a lot of population that don't have a city government. That's why we're so engaged with this regional task force and trying to find solutions. We're seeing a huge influx of apartments being built, but they're not, I would say they're not income aligned apartments. We had 508 units built in 2020. Last year, 1,600. 1,600 apartment units permitted last year. And it is, again, I believe you're correct, Representative Bratcher. It's economic base. We see these shifts where we'll go years where we'll build 1,000 single-family homes and hardly any apartments. You know, why is that? And now it's back the other way. But I think it's interest rates. I think it's housing costs. It just shifts dramatically.
Interesting. And I want to comment just as we close this out. Maybe Commissioner Collins might mention or agree or disagree with me out in Western Kentucky. But in Henderson County, our 2 challenges on housing is we've got $10,000 to $15,000 an acre farmland surrounding our city. Nobody wants to sell that because that's generational wealth that can be passed on to their kids. And then the other issue is just what you said, utilities, the extension of utilities. In our area, it takes 10 to 12 years for a neighborhood to fill out, selling 10 or 15 lots a year. And it's just, there's just not anybody out there at the current interest rates that are willing to put in $2 million worth of infrastructure and wait for it to come back. Is that similar?
You're very similar, for sure. And I would say that we have neighborhoods that would be more like 3 or 4 lots
Yeah.
a year, and that's doing well. So yeah, you're exactly right. And I would say too, you know, to Judge Moore's point with what they came together and had that study, I think we need to think about the more rural areas and our counties too, that sometimes maybe have to be pushed in, not pushed into that, but we need to look at a regional look at this.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes we're not forward thinking on having studies like this done. So
we finally, after 10 years of begging a housing company to come in and develop a subdivision, they finally developed one in Henderson County. It's got 300 lots, and you know the houses they're going to build are going to be 350 to 400,000, and we're all wondering, you know, who and how are they going to afford that? So it's going to be interesting to see how that subdivision fills out.
Yeah.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, the numbers you quoted, I think is a great example of in Boone County, farms that are being purchased for future subdivisions. If you can get it for $60,000 an acre, you're doing well. So immediately, this idea of building attainable income-aligned housing becomes quite challenging. And that's why we like the regional approach to our work, because our 5 southern counties, Pendleton, Gallatin, Grant, Owen, and Carroll, the land cost is much more affordable. And, you know, they're close enough with these commute times to possibly be a piece of the solution. And in most cases, those counties want population. So, you know, by working, you know, being wise in how we design and structure a strategy, we're going to have to work regionally. And one size doesn't fit all. Local control, who wants to build what and where. Last thing I'll say is the communities that figure this out are going to be the winners in the economic development world, because the need for employees is outgrowing the supply of housing. And if we don't figure it out, we're not going to win economic development projects, no matter what the incentives are, no matter what the site looks like, if we can't supply them workers. So we've got to figure it out, because if we don't, it's going to kill economic development.
Well, thank you all so much for
Thank
your
you.
testimony.
Thank you.
And we have one last individual to testify, and Mayor Gregory from E-Town. So we'll get and he's got some guests with him, it looks like. So we'll get an insight into what's going on in probably one of our more rapidly developing areas of the state. So welcome, gentlemen. If you can give your name and who you're with as you testify, that'd be great. Thank you. You might check your mic there. Yeah.
Got it. Thank you, Chairman Mills, Chairman Witten. I appreciate the opportunity to be in front of this honorable body. We do have some unique circumstances occurring in Hardin County, Elizabethtown, that we're thrilled to be able to tell you all about. With me at the table is our city administrator, Ed Pope, to my left. He was a 38-year planning director for the city of Elizabethtown, and then for the past 5.5 years, he's been the city administrator. So he brings a lot of knowledge on planning and development and some of the things that we've seen over the years in our area. So he'll be a great source. And then to my right is Joe Reverman, who is our current planning director, who spent a great deal of time in Louisville working with their planning and development before we were able to poach him down to Elizabethtown. I tell you, I'm surrounded by a Trinity grad and a St. X grad. Oh, 2 Trinity? Yeah. Oh, did I mess that up? So I insulted him, I guess. 2 Trinity grads. But either way, we're real pleased with what we have in our planning and development department. They bring a wealth of knowledge, and we need it based on what we are experiencing in Elizabethtown and Hardin County. As you all know, in September of 2021, we had the Blue Oval SK announcement, and so that really turned everything that we were doing upside down. We had just previously done a comprehensive plan study in 2020, and we basically could take a good bit of that and put it in the garbage and rework it. We've already amended it several times. And from the comprehensive plan that we did in 2020, one of the statistics that stood out to me that I found intriguing was that 53% of the people that live in the city limits of Elizabethtown rent. and I never dreamed that it would be that high. And so we haven't done a current study to see what that number is now, but I would guess that it is more than that now. But what we've seen since that announcement in September of 2021, when they told us they were going to put 9 million square feet, 4 miles south of Elizabethtown under roof, and they were going to build Blue Oval SK with 5,500 employees to start off with, has been something that has been overwhelming at times, has been exciting at times, but it has caused some unintended issues to arise, and one of those is housing. Obviously, we've had expansion of wastewater treatment, we've had child care issues, but the biggest one, and workforce, of course, but the biggest one that we need to deal with, or one of the biggest ones, has definitely been the housing. And since then, and I'll let Joe or Ed give you the numbers on that, but we have seen studies tell us that we need 4,500 more units, 6,000 more units. And when I say units, that can be multifamily, single family, however you look at it, just places for people to live. But what we experienced right on the front end was the existing units that we had was the rent prices went through the roof. And that was because we were bringing so many people in, and supply and demand will tell you that if you have more demand than supply, then you can get more for what you own already. And so our landlords, I think in a lot of cases, were taking advantage of that. And somebody mentioned it a few minutes ago, we have police officers that we think we pay well, especially for the area of the state that we live in, that are struggling to find places to live, especially when they come in and they're newer police officers, younger. They're struggling to find a residence that they can afford. I have a 24-year-old son that's a Hanover grad, graduated 2 years ago, and he's now working selling insurance for a firm here in Kentucky that's well known, and he's doing a really good job, but he's still living at my house because he's not married and doesn't have two incomes to go out with these interest rates and find something that's affordable that he can afford right now. And so we need to tackle that problem, because I need to free up some space in my house too, if you all will understand that. Senator Rocky Adams touched on something a minute ago about transportation, and we're currently doing a transportation study in Hardin County to prepare and be ready for exactly what she mentioned, and that's to be able to move the people around that we're hopefully can find housing for. And so we have pretty much covered and run the gamut of everything that Mayor Greenberg presented, that our judges presented, and that Shelley came up here and presented. So I won't regurgitate a lot of that information, but I'm going to let Joe talk to you a little bit about the numbers of permits that we've issued and some of the things that we're seeing when it comes to building and development in Elizabethtown.
Okay, gentlemen, we got maybe 10 or 15 minutes left in our time here, and just leave some time for questions.
Sure, it will be quick, I promise.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Joe Reverman.
You did it too.
Thank you. Yeah. So Joe Reverman. So pre-Blue Oval, as kind of a measuring stick for us right now, we issued permits for a little more than 100 housing units every year. And since then, we've done about, over the past 2 years, about 2,000 units. So we've done about 10 times more residential units since the announcement of Blue Oval. And as Mayor said, we were already short on housing before that, so now we're definitely short. Some of the biggest challenges that has resulted from that have really been from an infrastructure standpoint. I'll kind of echo the comments from the judge from Boone County that our planning and zoning processes have really not been a hindrance. We have some great partners in Elizabethtown, and getting developments through the approval stages and to build is not really an issue. Our bigger issue at the moment is really more with infrastructure, whereas before, with the previous state of development, we've been able to kind of plan and provide infrastructure in places where it was needed. But when you increase that tenfold just in a short amount of time, it's really difficult to build that infrastructure in advance. So we're really relying heavily at the moment on working with our private partners to get that infrastructure developed, as well as with the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, which has been a huge help to us the last couple of years in planning some of our transportation infrastructure.
You know, you heard him testify about density and walkability and the different things that can improve the situation. We've got all that on our list too. One of the things that we're noticing is we've had developers come in from all over the country, or have called or reached out to see if there was availability of property. And so there is availability of property, but somebody mentioned it earlier about the price increase. I think the judge from Boone County did. ground that pre-COVID was $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 an acre. Now you're looking at $25,000, $30,000, $35,000 an acre. That's contiguous to the city limits of Elizabethtown to come in and buy. And what a lot of these builders and developers have come in and from out of state, they've bought up developments that local developers have developed and tract build all of it. And so some of our local builders have run out of lots to be able to build because these tract builders are coming in and taking up all the lots that are available in the city limits. So they're coming in and they're looking for ground that's contiguous to our city, doing consensual annexations, you know, where there's not already businesses located on that ground. And the reason for that is because it's so important for them to be able to have sewer access, which our city utilities can provide, because they can build 4 houses per acre as opposed to 1 per acre if they don't have that sewer access and they're on septic. So we've seen a lot of interest from Utah and everywhere else that you can imagine, from developers coming in and purchasing ground to do that. And it's just we have to catch up with the amount of units as opposed to the amount of workers that we're seeing, because Blue Oval SK has also brought in, as we speak, 4 different Korean companies to our industrial park in the city limits of Elizabethtown, to include Lotte Aluminum, A&P, and we just signed a new one, and we put Kentucky Whiskey House in our industrial park. And which one am I forgetting? And Inchem, yeah. So, I mean, we keep getting ancillary projects because of the Blue Oval plant, and it just continues to mount and exacerbate our need for more housing, it seems like, every day. But we're trying to stay ahead of it infrastructure-wise. We're proud of what we've done, but it's been a mad rush all at once.
I just want to reiterate a couple comments the mayor made and earlier speakers, and some of the comments that you all have made in our efforts at the local level to address those situations. And through the planning in our comprehensive plan, we've tried to develop the regulations to streamline things. As was mentioned earlier, we've had housing forums with our local builders too. We think it works best at the local level when we're in control of the process and can work to address our specific needs. There was discussion of density and transportation. One of the things that we do with our regulations not only allow mix of densities, but mix of housing types to try to make the areas more walkable, allow those uses so that people can work and live in the same location. Our council, mayor and council have put a lot of money in our older sections of town, redoing sidewalks and those kind of things, again, to make that part of the community walkable to groceries and restaurants and those kind of things. And we've also put in place, from a land use standpoint, pocket parks where we're creating residential in our residential neighborhoods, park areas, so that nobody in our community has more than a 1 mile walk to any park or open space, to address some of the concerns you all mentioned earlier about density and those kind of things.
Senator Yates has a question.
This was underlining, again, and I think we all talked about local control, but also having been on planning and zoning, well, back in the day, you know, sometimes it's those variants for zoning. I said a lot of times say it's not generally an issue, but if you get into the issues of like, you know, the price per acre being high, somebody can only put 1 house on an acre. Well, sometimes somebody may purchase 3 acres and want to apply for a variance, so you could put 6 houses on 3 acres. And a lot of times, I think given that local control and allowing you to do those zoning variances can make that difference, especially if you're trying to have that infill. So I keep underlining that because I know that's some changes we have to make here.
And I will tell you, from my career in Elizabethtown, I know the issue of density has come up. Most of the time, the average folks, in going through that hearing process and looking at those variances and changing density, most folks don't know the difference between 4 units per acre and 8 units per acre and 12 units per acre. My experience has been, if the property is well maintained and designed, that's what most folks are concerned about. Does it look nice in my neighborhood? Does it fit in my neighborhood? And they really can't tell you the differences between those densities. So I think enforcement at that local level, which is what we do with property maintenance codes and other other codes, holds those property values for the residents, and they've been generally, in our community at least, more accepting to those kind of proposals because of the appearance and the upkeep of properties.
Senator Mills, if I could, you asked Mayor Greenberg a question earlier about average cost so it's been my experience just with a local or with a developer that's come in and looked at some property that we have, and I asked that exact question. On average, it's about $150,000 a door is what we were told.
I don't think we have any other questions, but since we got you in front of us, you're in front of us, could you give us like a 2-minute review of how SK development's going? And just, I'd heard in the past that maybe both buildings weren't going to be built out at the same time. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Not to go into a lot of detail, but just curious.
No, I'd be glad to. So it's my understanding that the Plant 1, Kentucky Plant 1, is going to be active and is going to be online. I don't know that I've heard a date exactly. I think second quarter of 25 is what they were looking at to be in production. They have slowed down the second plant, and they're using that for storage from what I understand right now until they wait and see what this EV market does. But we've asked everybody that you can imagine from Blue Oval SK, what their feelings are and where they think they are as far as the EV market and what kind of production they're going to have out there from what they initially thought. And none of them seem to be alarmed or scared. They do say, things have changed, but it was always very fluid. And I think initially the message got out that they were going to be ripping and roaring both plants by middle of 2025, and 5,500 people would be employed there immediately, and then they'd try to ramp up from there. But that was really not the message that they gave us initially. They said their ramp up would be all the way into 2030. So I don't think that I think the news that we hear about EVs and how it's slower as far as people purchasing them, I don't think alarms them like it alarms the rest of us that are reading that and don't have any insight from before when they announced initially. I think they're right on track and right on program, maybe a little slower than they meant to be, but I don't think there's any alarm bells going off with Blue Oval SK.
But from a development standpoint, it's probably better for your community.
And that was what I was getting ready to say. Yep. It's allowed us some time to play catch up from an announcement 2.5 years ago that we weren't exactly expecting, but we're really thrilled about that.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your patience for being at the end of our meeting. And committee members, if you don't have anything else, we'll stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Oh, our next meeting is August 26th. Thank you.
Good to see you. You doing well?
Yeah, you were telling me I got a bunch we were talking about.